I stay or should I go?
Thank you everyone for joining us on this latest video. Myself and John, we're here to talk about something really important because very soon it's going to be January and the transfer window will be upon us. And it's not all about who is the next Marcus Tavernier holding up a Bournemouth shirt. There's other business that the club need to deal with. And coming up very soon is players out of contract, which include 3 players that we want to talk about in this video. Jefferson Lerma, Zemura and Jaidon Anthony. We want to get your thoughts at the end of this video in the comments. Please do use it. It's your platform to tell us how you're feeling. We read every single one. Hit the like button, subscribe. And John, this is going to be an interesting conversation between us. In any sort of deal, trying to get a player to sign a new contract, there's going to be many factors that come into it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a difficult one to sort of try and nail down exactly what we can do with regard to these as well, because the club is still, as at the time of recording, has not finalised the takeover, although we're pretty confident that nothing's going to hold that up. But it means the club is in some small level of flux. And what are the players looking for in those between the 3 players? It's probably all going to be something different. And as is the case with making an initial signing along with making a contract extension, the needs and desires of the player need to suit up with the wants of the club. And we've got to hope that it works out for all 3 of them. But, we'll discuss whether that can actually happen or not.
Factors then. Let's get stuck into it. Jefferson Lerma, I mean, he's been a player now for Bournemouth for quite a few years. He's had over 150 appearances, something like 9 goals. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and this is a big player in his prime, John. 28. I mean, normally for a club, this is a dilemma to let a player go on a free at the end of the season. I do get the feeling, though, that as Bournemouth, we'd probably be happy to see him off in a nice way. We'd be holding no grudges, but we'd probably cut our losses if it kept us in the Premier League because he's such a big player for us. He's played every single game, and money's probably not going to come into it with Jeff Lerma, I don't think.
No, I don't think so. Just before recording, I did just double check to see whether Lerma had actually signed a contract extension with us already. And as far as I'm aware, he hasn't. I believe he's still on his initial deal. He signed on a 5-year deal. He may have signed a pay increase at one point without an extension on the deal, but I don't think that would be the case. So, his wages now are less than what he signed on because there will have been a relegation clause in his initial contract. That would have gone down when we got relegated, and it won't automatically have gone back up again, I don't believe. So I don't think money is an issue for him. If those of you who haven't, I'd encourage you to read Ahmed Shubal's piece on this that he released today on The Athletic if you have a subscription. If not, grab one. Hit us up, Ahmed, if you want us to advertise. We'll be happy to do that for you. But the crux of the matter is that I think Jeff wants to return to Spain. I think he essentially has a young family with, I believe it's a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. I think he has an okay grasp of English. I'm sure he does okay, communicating with his teammates and the manager, but he's a native Spanish speaker, and would like to return to something that he's more culturally comfortable with in terms of wherever that might be in Spain. So it's going to be a very difficult one to convince him to stay. I don't think money is really necessarily a thing that drives him at all. So in terms of that being one of the factors, if someone isn't really that asked about the money and is wanting to move away for personal reasons, it's very difficult to sort of say, no, stay because we'll pay you more. And it's well, that's not really the issue here. So, convincing Jeff to stay is going to be very difficult. But as you said, I do think that whilst I have definitely had differing opinions with people online regarding people leaving previously. I think the likes of Wilson and Ramsdale, I was very happy to see, and Ake, I was very comfortable to see go for decent amounts. I think a few people were probably a bit more frustrated, particularly with Ramsdale, when I think he was comfortable to stay and then the money was there and he went, which I don't begrudge him at all, but some did. Whereas with Lerma, he's so important to the team. And, you know, if he could help us stay up, he'd be worth losing out on whatever millions it would be getting for him in January. I think there's an argument to say that I think probably behind Ake and Wilson, he's probably been our best player in our Premier League era. I think that third place is a tough one to nail down, but I think Lerma is arguably the third best Premier League player we've had. If you say Wilshere, don't take Wilshere in his prime, just look at what he did for us. But yeah, he's been so good, and it'll be a big miss, but one I wouldn't begrudge moving away, particularly for family reasons.
I suppose if the takeover goes through, and it's not our money, we're Bournemouth fans. You know, some fans have seen some really, really tough times, and we're potentially going into a future where we're going to have a billionaire owner. So maybe 10 million of a loss, which it probably will be if we were not to sell him in January. But we do have to understand here, John, he's 28 years old and he's competed in World Cups. He's still at the top of his game in his prime. You know, stats would tell you. I mean, if he had a 2-year contract, he's worth 20 million quid. You can't ignore that. I mean, we're not going to get 20 million pounds for him. We are potentially going to lose him for nothing, but I think we go back to the point of the value of keeping him to the end of the season, our potential survival on £100 million from the Premier League. That's probably your counter argument.
Yeah, and I don't want to rattle on too much more because I just say a lot about Lerma, but I think with him being our record signing for 25 million, you know, if we had 2 years left on him, we'd be asking for more than that because of inflation, because of the fact that he's older, he's more experienced, he's shown what he can do in more than one league. You know, he's worth a lot of money if he's on if he's on at least a couple year contract. But unfortunately, now he's not. With 6 months left, I think we'd be lucky to get. We'd probably be pushing at least 8 figures, but yeah, it certainly wouldn't be a profit on that 25 million. But it would be, you know, if we needed the money, it'd be worth going for. But we probably don't anymore. So he's much more valuable in helping us stay in the division.
I'm not saying there is a way that we could keep Jefferson Lerma. I think there's a good chance we could probably have got Jeff Lerma nailed down on a new contract. And I'm going to say it, and I think potentially a manager could have that convincing arm, but it doesn't guarantee you it. I mean, he's played under Gary O'Neill for every single game, but is that an argument to say that there potentially was a manager out there, a head coach, shall I say, to get it right, that could have convinced Jefferson Lerma to sign a new AFC Bournemouth contract?
Maybe. But I think if Scott Parker wouldn't have been that it wouldn't have been that coach or manager, I'm not sure what sort of level above in terms of reputation in football we could have gotten that necessarily would have been the tipping point for Lerma. If it was, then maybe it would have to have been a foreign manager. Might have been, you know, a highly rated young manager from Spain, maybe, who maybe could change things up slightly within the club that made things more comfortable for him in a different way. But that's a tough one to look at because obviously I suppose you're probably looking at Bielsa in terms of that one, that maybe he could have been the man, but yeah,
we'll never really know, I suppose.
We'll never know, and that's a tough one to say without obviously having that with living in this current timeline. That's difficult to know whether that would have changed things. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one to theorize, but we'll never know, unfortunately.
Let's talk about Jordan Zemura, a player that came straight into that lineup, I think, against West Brom, opening game for Scott Parker in the Championship, and he didn't look back from that. He got a goal against Bristol City on the road. I'm trying to remember those games from the Championship last season. He was very attacking. people sometimes say he's not very good at the back. I think he's not that bad, actually, but I think he is very forward thinking. I like that in a fullback. He likes his overlaps. He likes getting forward. He does create opportunities, and he's a player that's come out of our academy. I think he originally started at Charlton, and then he ended up in the AFC Bournemouth Academy. He's worked his way through, and he's not looked back. I really like Jordan Zemura. I think he needs a backup to help him, just in case he has some tough times or an injury, and we'll talk about that in January. But he's currently sitting on a contract that's running out. Now, we know we'll get something back for him in a tribunal because of his age. Oh, John, we can't lose Jordan Zemura. I mean, we'd have no left backs. And this is another player that's surely worth at least 5 to 10 million. And the question I would like to ask, John, is if there's offers on the table, I'm sure they are, how high are those offers? And is he guaranteed more football at another club, or is it money? These are these factors, John.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for both him and the other youngster that we'll come on to later. It's curious on both of them in terms of the wages that they're on now. I'm pretty sure I remember reading, and based on looking up and seeing what his wages are apparently now, it doesn't surprise me that he is the lowest earning professional in the Premier League, as far as I'm aware. Like, he's on less than I am, and I am not on anything special at all, particularly for my age. And he's on I believe it's £365 a week. So he's on barely over 20 grand a year, which when you're a professional footballer in the Premier League is a hell of a thing for him to, which is what I quite like about, which makes me like Zemura, but also a bit worried, is the fact that offers are definitely on the table. And for him to not have jumped on that, where his wages are probably going to go up by tenfold, you would imagine, probably at least. For him to just be comfortable and say, no, I'm good with what I've got. I want to see how this is going to go, makes me sort of quite impressed with his mentality, impressed with the fact that he's so focused on his game and playing for the club. But at the same time thinking, can the club not really convince him to sign now? Like, it's based on what he's on, based on what he could be earning, based on the contract length that we could give him. So for him not to have signed is both impressive and worrying. And you would think that maybe game time is part of it, but that is starting to increase again. And he's the only left back at the club at the moment, so he's got no competition for the most part, unless Adam Smith goes over there, which, as we have discussed many a time, Kirk, we don't like happening, unless in extreme circumstances. So, yes, it's an interesting one with Zemura, because I think he really has shown that he's definitely of the quality that he could easily play for a Premier League side on a relatively regular basis. He might not be the first choice at most other Premier League clubs, but he's definitely good enough to start to be a very good backup for most mid-table sides, I would say, in the Prem, and certainly is our best left back. Is our de facto best left back at the moment, but it could well be even if we bring someone else in January.
So if it's not about money, and we don't really know, and I'm sure there is offers on the table from the club, and I'm sure they're respectable offers, and I do agree with you. I have heard of the money that he was paid in the Championship, and that's what I heard, the figure, about 300 quid. If it's not about money, is it down to that he doesn't potentially have enough faith that he is the number one left back, although the only left back? He's been picked 50% of the time under Gary O'Neill, and then Gary O'Neill's fitted with putting a right-footed right back at left back. Is that playing on his mind, do you think?
I mean, it could be. The thing is, a lot of the conversation that we'll have later down the line about with Anthony kind of works with Zemura as well, in terms of it could be quite a calculated move between himself and his agent, in terms of, because his contract is running down, footballers know that if they move on a free, they will get better wages wherever they move to. It doesn't matter where Zemura moves to from here, whether it be to another team in the Prem or a team in the Championship. Heck, even if he moved into League One, which I think would be below his level at this point, his wages will go up. His wages will be significantly better than they are now. So if he chooses to run down his contract here, he gets a pick of wherever he thinks he will get the most game time. Whereas at the moment, yes, he's playing in the Prem, but I think for his age, he's probably looking, I need to be playing more often. And at the moment, that's not happening as much as I think it should be. And I think he's proven that he's good enough when he plays, but has just sort of been in and out a little bit, but now has found another stretch of playtime again. So I think if he does play regularly enough, then I think he'll probably, then he could well decide to stick around. And it may actually be that if we do, I mean, I hope we stay up, I do. But if we drop down, that actually might make it more appealing for Zemura to sign again, because he knows he can stick around and he's definitely going to be the first choice left back if we were to get relegated. So, yeah, it's. I do think money is going to be some aspect, but it's clearly not the most important one. Game time is probably the most important thing for him at the moment.
The word in this video is factor, because as you're talking then, I'm also thinking about Gary O'Neill again in this early journey of head coach, and he's tried a few things in that interim spell, and we're still yet to really know what Gary O'Neill is as a head coach. And if you're putting yourself in Jordan Zemura's shoes, is it a back four? Probably. But is it a back three? I can still play wing back. These things must be going through his head. And he'll obviously be having conversations with Gary O'Neill. Of course he will. And the club. And I'm sure they're saying you are a massive prospect and a massive part of this future of our team. But I'm trying to put myself in his shoes, John. And I'm trying to think, I don't know what Gary O'Neill is yet. I don't know what the philosophy is. So if you're wanting to pen me down on a 4-year contract, I could be in and out of this team, maybe not part of this team in a year's time, weirdly.
Yeah. And I think January will definitely be the thing that sort of helps solidify his thoughts on that. I think, because I would be amazed if we don't bring in a left back / left wing back in January, because if we will have seemingly the financial clout to be able to bring in another few players. We will need to obviously sell a few as well in order to make room in the squad, but there has to be some more competition in there, because Adam Smith at left back really isn't enough of cover, and Zemura is great and I think he should play more, but you probably want another option as well. So whether that be more experienced or just a different shape, different style, whatever it might be. So if Zemura is able to sort of determine with regards to what level of competition he's got, what his likelihood of playing is, and then is the position that I have to fill good for my game in Zemura's, in looking at Zemura, will what Gary O'Neill wants to do allow me to get forward and utilize the best parts of my game, or am I going to force to hold back a lot from what I like to do and what I think I'm best at? So the one thing I would say is that regardless of Gary O'Neill's plans as a whole within a match, Zemura is given free rein for a lot of to attack for the most part, because I think he's well aware that if he's got Adam Smith on the right, he's not going to get forward. And if we play in this sort of pseudo back five, where quite often you have Tavernier acting as sort of more of a wing back and coming back to defend and keeping that sort of solid 3 base, Zemura has to be the one to get forward to provide any kind of attacking impetus from one side. So I think regardless of how O'Neill wants to play things out, Zemura is actually quite key in terms of the getting attacking on the left-hand side. But then again, he's only played half the game, so he's clearly not overly important. Otherwise, he would have played him more often. So yeah, there's a lot that's I think that we need to sort of find more about Gary O'Neill and about what he wants to do with the players and the squad, and that will come into things. I'm sure it will, in terms of factoring what Jay-Z wants to do.
Worst case scenario, if we do lose Jordan Zemura and the next player we're going to talk about in a moment, we will get some sort of a fee. There is a Bournemouth fan on Twitter, AFCB Rob. I'll see if I can put something in the description, who sent me a link about how the tribunal works, how much we might get. So click that link, do check it out. It's very informative. It's not that detailed. Even I understood it, John. Even I understood it. We would get something. But look, you're still talking about a substantial amount of money for Jordan Zemura under a decent contract. Moving on to the next player, which is again a a player out of our academy who's been with us a lot longer, I think, than Zemura, and that's Jaidon Anthony. And this one, I think, John, is going to be tough because Jaidon Anthony had a very, very good breakthrough season last season in the Championship. The first real season where he was given a chance. And he's even had an impact this season, getting the winner at Nottingham Forest, getting goals in the Carabao Cup and coming off the bench and making an impact. Not yet started, though, under the previous manager, head coach we had, Scott Parker, and hasn't started for Gary O'Neill, I don't think. Definitely not in the Premier League. And this might be a problem for the club, getting Jaidon Anthony on a new contract, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think pretty much all of the discussion we've had about Jordan Zemura also works for Jaidon Anthony. I mean, Anthony, I think, is probably in about double-ish what Zemura is on, but that's still not a lot for a Premier League footballer. Although, you know, he doesn't play, he certainly doesn't get the same level of minutes that Zemura does. There's a lot more competition in the position that Anthony takes up on that left wing, left forward, or, you know, obviously can switch over to the right as well. But yeah, he's finding game minutes really difficult to come by at the moment. And the way that he has an impact in games, I do feel that he can be quite rightly frustrated that he's not getting more opportunities. And when you think that, you know, Dembele has barely played, Jamal Lowe has barely played, and looks like he's probably going to be heading out as well. Rothwell, who can sort of play possibly in a similar position to Jaidon Anthony, is coming back to fitness. You've got David Brooks is coming back to fitness that may shift Tavernier over to the left if Brooks takes up the right sided position. Things aren't going to get any easier for Jaidon Anthony to get minutes. And on top of the fact that we're probably going to look to sign at least one other attacker in January, I would imagine, certainly a striker. Which isn't Anthony's position, admittedly, but it's still sort of arguably more competition if it's the right kind of player. So this one will be tough to convince for him to stick around, because when he was incredibly close to doing a double-double in the Championship last season. He got 9, I think it was about 16 goals and assists, something I think was 9 of one and 7 of another, or something close. If you can perform to that level in your breakthrough season in the Championship, you don't have to sit on the bench for a Premier League side. He is at the point where, just like Zemura, he is desperate to get those minutes to keep progressing as a player. And I think that his skill set for the position that he plays is quite a lot different to a lot of other players of his build. And I think his intelligence on the ball and his ability to play a pass is something that we need to utilize more. I think he's really got the ability to have more of an impact than he has done. And if we're not playing him, he's got no reason to stick around, because why would you? He'll have plenty of suitors in the Championship, and maybe even from 1 or 2 teams that come up into the Prem next season, whoever that might be. I mean, you look at Burnley and the way they're playing at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if Vincent Kompany would be interested in picking him up when they probably get promoted into the Prem. So I am, again, similarly like you, I'm more worried that we won't be able to keep hold of Jaidon Anthony because of the lack of game time. And if we do lose even one of those two, I would be very, very disappointed. And there are some fingers to point for losing out like that.
The fact that it's got to this point means there must be doubt in every player that we're talking about. And I think we understand Lerma's situation a little bit more. I think Lerma might be looking at this as maybe Lard's chance saloon to play in Europa League for a Spanish side. I get all of that. I get if he's got different ambitions. I think he's definitely paid off his money. No doubt. So I doubt that if anyone questions me and thinks that you don't think Jefferson Lerma's paid off his transfer fee, I don't know what more he's got to do. So I'm quite happy with the Jeff Lerma. I'd be sad. I'd be not disappointed. I'd be devastated, not disappointed. I want Jeff Lerma in the Bournemouth shirt till he retires. But look, I'm true with that. But the fact is, John, we were talking earlier, and I was saying earlier that it's okay. We've got a billionaire owner coming in, but hang on a minute now. Now you're talking about 3 players on decent contracts could be up to something like 40, 50 million quid. Yes, they're not on decent contracts, but it's still money in the game that the club could have to put towards the next David Brooks or the next left back.
Yes. I think if we were to lose Jefferson Lerma, I mean, I don't know what he's on, but certainly in terms of what Zemura or Anthony could end up going up to, I don't think it would be exactly breaking the bank by any means. But I do see what you're getting at in terms of every penny spent elsewhere is a penny that you can't spend on a new player, for instance. Although the club do have priorities in that don't consist of player sales or player incomings in terms of dealing with the new training ground, which is certainly going to need a significant chunk of money going to it first. But reports that I've seen certainly imply that definitely a left back, an attacker, and I think at least maybe another centre back, I think are probably certainly on priorities. Maybe a winger instead, but it depends on who leaves as well. For these two players, it's I think the thing we both settled on is going to be more so game time. And whereas Zemura is getting that, Anthony is not. I mean, looked up sort of the most recent articles about the two players, and you've got Zemura. Most recent article was a BBC Radio Solent interview just over a month ago, where he seems pretty keen to extend. Whereas go back a month prior, and article on Jaidon Anthony is he thinks the fact that he's not signing a contract is affecting how much game time he's getting. So in which case, that implies an even worse impasse when neither side is going to be able to, where each one thinks the other one is an issue, and then nothing happens for the rest of the year. It's a really tough one, and I do think that the club should be doing everything they can to particularly keep hold of these two youngsters, because as much as you say, yes, you could spend money on bringing in the next David Brooks or bringing in the next left back, the fact is we have brought through the next left back in Zemura, and we have got arguably the next David Brooks for Bournemouth in Jaidon Anthony. He's just not getting the game time. When we brought in Brooks, he barely had a full season when he brought in David Brooks. But we thought he was so good that he was worth it, and obviously, well and truly, he set the club alight he set the Prem alight in his first season. And I think that if Anthony got more chances, he could do the same. I think he really is good enough to do it, but if he doesn't get those, then he's not going to sign, because what's the point? He might as well go somewhere else to get that game time. And sometimes it can be just as simple as that, really. If I'm not going to play, what's the point of sticking around?
That was a brilliant counter hand you just played there, John. The next David Brooks, and he is the next left back. I mean, that was a perfect return hand that you just played. We were interested, the fans, you watching this video, really appreciate you checking it out. More content coming, especially during the transfer window. But how are you feeling about this? Tell us about how you're feeling about Jefferson Lerma, Jaidon Anthony, Jordan Zemura. Have we missed anything? Add value to this video. Do tell us what other hands the club could play to keep these players. But I'm going to ask John one final question before we wrap this up. And this is more of a personal question, John. We're going to put all our eggs in one basket. Well, I say put all our eggs in one basket. That's probably what we should do. We probably know the end of the road is nearing for Jefferson Lerma. So put all our eggs in one basket for Anthony and Zemura. But if you could keep 2 out of 3, you were guaranteed that 2 out of 3 would stay. Which 2 would you pick? And you're probably not going to play this game, but I'm putting it on the table.
Oh, that's really harsh.
You're not going to play, are you?
If I could only keep 2, but I would definitely be keeping 2.
Yeah. You could definitely convince 2, and it doesn't matter about the circumstances and the factors, but what 2 would you like to keep? I'm surprised you're even going down the road to play the game. It's a bit of a risk by me.
So there's 2 answers to this. I would say if I'm thinking purely in terms of the now, and what I think is best for the immediate future, would probably be Zemura and Lerma, because we have far more cover in the attacking positions. Not to say that we don't have cover for Lerma as well, because we still have Ben Pearson, who's barely getting any game time. Who wouldn't be surprised if he forces a move in January to get to start getting football again. But and that's not even to say Lewis Cook could also obviously fits in there. Philip Billing is underrated as a tackler. Yeah. However, not that I don't absolutely love Lerma, but on a personal level, I would far rather keep the youngsters. I'm so much more invested in the development of players that come through the academy. They mean so much more, I think, to me as my version of being a Bournemouth fan, to have, which we haven't had since we were since we were down in the doldrums of League One and League Two, to have some youngsters come through the academy and shine. Is something that I think we've really been missing as a club. So to have these two, to possibly lose these two, would be absolutely devastating. And like I said, it's not that I don't really rate Lerma. Like I said, I think he's arguably the third best player we've ever had in a Bournemouth shirt, certainly in our time in the Prem. We've had 5 years of him, and he's reaching his peak, and we'll see how long it takes before he's, finding the other side of that. And we've had players that we thought we'd love to have forever in Sermon and Arta, and it took 3 months of poor performances for them to start getting booed off the pitch. So, things can change quite quickly when players are starting to come over the hill. So, it's a difficult one.
I'm not going to play my game, but I'm going to concur with you, because somehow you've enabled yourself to get all of those 3 players in that question. And I think that's brilliant, because we love all 3 of them. But to end this video, John, I think we have to get some of these players. I don't think we can afford to lose all 3 for nothing. It won't be quite nothing for 2 of them, because we'll get those fees, those tribunal fees, because of their age and they've been in our academy. But we've got to get a deal done. We've got to keep some of them, because the future might look bright for Bournemouth. And if we want to go places and we want to grow our academy even more, we're going to need players that are going to look up to Zemura, look up to Anthony, and be the next AFC Bournemouth that we all hope will be on the horizon.
Yep, absolutely. And like you said, we need that academy status improving so we can keep bringing in the best players. I mean, we have a number of youngsters in the system at the moment that, we'll see, can they make it, can they not? We've got a few that I know we all know are quite highly rated, and I think as we're recording this, some of them are playing at the moment as well. But we really do need to keep hold of them. I mean, like I said, would be absolutely devastated if we lose both Zemura and Anthony, and I think we're more hopeful that Zemura will stick around, but I certainly hope they both decide to. But things are still looking up as a club. Once that takeover comes in, once January kicks in, I'm sure we'll be strengthening the side. We'll be letting go of a few players as well anyway. And for those that are watching, question out there, who do you think we should be signing in January? We talked about we need refreshment. We talked about we need support. We think probably definitely a left back, probably a striker, maybe a centre back. What names are there that are out there that the fans think, well, do they think a pie in the sky? Do you think we can start going a bit more unrealistic, as it were, with billions to spend? Well, I say billions, you know what I mean, with a billionaire owner. Or, are there any names out there that you think you've seen in the World Cup, perhaps, and you think, if they're a middling German side, maybe we can try and nick them from someone. I don't know, but it'd be interested to look in the comments to see. Let us know what you think would be a decent challenge to Zemura for one, and maybe a few other positions as well.
Stick them in the comments, because we will be talking about more transfer window stuff once January hits. So we'll pick up those comments and we'll discuss it. We'll have myself, John, and the rest of the team throughout the month. So yeah, John, it's been great to talk to you and discuss these players, and let's hope you get some positive outcomes. I think your phone was vibrating. It might be Zemura Anthony just reassuring you they're going to sign a new contract. So we won't hold you up any longer. But thanks for coming on.
Maybe. I mean, if it was a missed call that I don't know the number of, you never know. But yes, thank you very much. So I'll make sure I don't have that on vibrate next time. But yes, thanks very much for having me on again. And be interesting to see what happens over the next few months. And hopefully, who knows? By the time we put this out, they'll have already both signed. Fingers crossed.
Hopefully. Right, thanks for checking out this video. Make sure you stay tuned for more content. Hit that notification bell, follow us across our socials, and hit the like button. We try to get to at least 50 likes on our videos, so much appreciated. And we'll see you on the next one. From me and John, up the cherries.
Up the cherries.